With the inaugural 12-team college football playoffs slated to kick off on Friday night in South Bend, the two competitors there are ironically from the same state, but from two different levels of prestige. One team has enjoyed prestige for the last 150 years. The other school has been struggling just to become relevant. One team seems to get back to its former glory, and the other one just wants to be relevant. Want to find out what the team of glory must do in order to achieve success and reclaim its once dominance on the college football landscape? Stay tuned to find out on Gridiron Gab Triple Option. Welcome back, Gabbers. Thank you all for gabbing out with us. Of course, you're gabbing with your man, Mr. CeeLo. And I hope you guys are doing great. Just joining you for another edition of the Perfect Bracket, Championship Edition. That has a good ring to it. I like that. The Perfect Bracket, Mr. CeeLo edition. But let us get to a quick little bit of housekeeping. Mr. CeeLo's crunch for time. Let's get this done. Who is your vote to win the Heisman Trophy? And looking here, 47% of you guys said Ashton Jeanty. Make that 48% of you said Ashton Jeanty. 2% of you guys said Cam Ward. 45% of you said Travis Hunter. 2% said Dylan Gabriel. 2% said Tyler Warren. And 1% said Shedeur Sanders. Thank you, Christian Brighton, for that addition, because I think he was a forgotten guy in all of this. Thank you so much for that. But, and as I said, Ashton Jeanty was shysted for this, and I honestly don't like it. And it goes back to, just one of those situations where, there you go. Sometimes players that are quiet don't get nearly as much, and I think if Ashton Jeanty would have been gloating, or Cam Ward would have been gloating, because let's keep it in perspective, you guys. Cam Ward and Ashton Jeanty dominated the Heisman watch. I mean, it seemed like every week, especially the first part of the year, it was Cam Ward just eating up the press. And I just don't understand how you could say a guy who you had to get Dion to say almost every game said, I think he had a great game and this, that, and the other. And bro, we saw highlights of Jeanty and Cam Ward, and even Dylan Gabriel. Where were you at? I mean, it took, 2 games? And then I heard comparisons to Charles Woodson. Bro, don't even do that. This guy single-handedly beat Ohio State by himself. You don't even have a signature game. Oh, I'm sorry, that 3-touchdown finale against who? Come on now, give me a break. Stop it. I don't want to spend any more time talking about that. I mean, let's move on to a team that guys like Brad just don't give no respect to. But we're going to take it back. They're going to take it back. And that will be the Fighting Irish of Notre Dame. Now, as many of you know, you guys know I am a Notre Dame Fighting Irish fanatic. Born and raised blue and gold, gold and blue through and through. So, to me, this is felt like the best team Notre Dame's had in about 10 years. And a lot of people are going to say they still ain't there. I get into debates all the time on Facebook. They're not physical enough. They're not fast enough. Well, as I am shooting this show, as we are speaking, Alabama cornerback Devontae Smith is transferring to the University of Notre Dame. So it's slowly beginning to see through a lot of these players what Marcus Freeman is building, as well as what the program is willing to do for him, as they extended him and making him one of the highest paid coaches in the country, which I am grateful for because he's one of the top coaches nobody's talking about. SEC, SEC. Just get tired of hearing that narrative. The only good football is played in the Southeastern Conference.
I don't believe anything.
But for those of you who don't know, let us introduce you to the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, shall we? Now, contrary to what Paul Weinbaum says, this is a football team that is very quietly one of the top running teams in the country. Whether people look at this or not, you've got a guy in Jeremiah Love who is just 51 yards from 1,000. Riley Leonard has 721 yards on the year. Jadarian Price has 651. And you've got Love has 15 touchdowns, Leonard has 14 touchdowns, and Jadarian Price has 7 touchdowns. All three of these guys are very dangerous. And the reality of it is they're both different in their own way. Jeremiah Love is a strong back, but he's very agile and very fast. Already being looked at by the National Football League. Very, very, very much the big-time playmaker in this offense. Then you've got quietly Jadarian Price, who's a guy who you don't look at him. He split carries with Jeremiah Love, and that's another thing, guys. Love's only got 134 carries on the year. Price has got less than 100. All three of these guys, this is what makes them dangerous, and you can even throw a freshman, Aeneas Williams, in here. Neither one of these guys have average less than 5.8 yards a carry. Love averages 7.1, Jadarian Price 7.3, Riley Leonard 5.8, and of course Aeneas Williams 6.7. The big issue most teams have with this football team is knowing when and where they're going to hit you from. Now, I will say this, for a team that does not do a lot of misdirection and a team that does not disguise what they're doing, they run the ball so well. And this is why. Notre Dame is one of the top offensive line groups in the country. That is what they recruit. They consistently get some of the best linemen in the country. As you've seen, they've had tackles go in the first round. Joe Alt's one of those guys. You've got several guys that went in the second and third round this past year. And what's scary is Notre Dame's two best offensive linemen are out for the season. And they're going to be redshirted. So you're going to have several more years of this great big offensive line coming. And the scary part is, with this bracket that I'm about to show you guys, Notre Dame wins a national championship. This is going to be on notice for everybody in the country. Because what's happening is this team is reloading. They've already got several guys out this season with injury. Guys like in the secondary, Benjamin Morrison. And guys on the defensive side of the ball you got guys like Boubacar Traore, who had 3 sacks in just a handful of games. And you see Jordan Patella, who was also off to a big start for the Irish. These are guys that, and what's scary is guys like Junior Tuialamaka, who came up, had 2 sacks, and he's got an interception. And Jason Onye, these are guys that are backups that are coming out here making a difference. So while people laugh and chuckle at Notre Dame, this is a team that is building. Marcus Freeman's getting this team up there to be a consistent contender. And this year's going to prove it. They're going to make a big run into the college football playoff. The only question is, can they knock off the one big bad wolf that they would have in this entire segment, which is a top 5, a literal top 5 super team. And I would call them let me rephrase it, a top 5 elite. That's what you want. They had their chance against Ohio State. They muffed it. Had a chance against Georgia. They muffed it. But this is their opportunity. Many in South Bend are saying that this needs to be the year. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen this year. But let's go around, like we said, and let's meet the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Everybody talks about the running game, but nobody really talks about the passing game. Riley Leonard, this is a guy that has really become a much better passer. A lot of people say there's not been a lot of depth at receiver or a lot of guys who can make plays at receiver. I beg to differ. The issue has been Riley Leonard. And I think ultimately, this is a guy that is going to make enough plays. You got Bo Collins, who had 34 grabs for 427 yards. Jaden Grayhouse, 26, 345. Mitchell Evans, the All-American at 272, but he's got 3 touchdown grabs. Jaden Harrison, who's become a somewhat of a middle of the deep, I guess you could say he is Notre Dame's deep threat. Then you got Jordan Faison, who's done a great job getting down the field. Chris Mitchell on the way as well. And then you've got Eli Raridan, who has been a huge red zone target for Riley Leonard, along with Cooper Flanagan. You've got Eli Raridan, and this is where I believe he's going to be huge in these playoffs. He's 6'7", 250, and if you watch the USC game, he just made it look easy. Cooper Flanagan is another one. He is 6'6", another big target. And then you also have Deion Colsey, the 6'4", 212-pound senior who's getting to see more and more playing time. I believe these big receivers are going to be huge in this college football playoff. But let's get started with Notre Dame's path to the perfect path. Mr. CeeLo's perfect path to the national title. As you know, Notre Dame has they have no choice as to whether they play Indiana or Georgia. But they do have a choice as to how they play them. Now, going against Indiana in South Bend. Now, everybody's knowing that this game is going to be darn near below freezing by the time this game kicks off. There's going to be 2 factors that are going to play into Notre Dame's favor. One, it's going to be the snow. Because what happens is Rourke and the Indiana offense not going to be able to do well in that snow. Very difficult to throw the football in the snow, especially with the wind blowing. Now, if Notre Dame can get their running game going, this is going to be massive because ultimately, Indiana's not a great running team, but they can run it. That's the thing that Indiana tricks people with. They give the impression that, hey, Indiana doesn't run the football. Notre Dame has been shown that they can be gashed with the run. Not to the point where it's damaging, but they can be gashed in a situation where it could turn out to be, okay, they're giving up a lot of runs. You got Tyson Lawton with 634 and Justice Ellison at 811. Now, both of these guys have 10, 12 touchdowns between them. You got 22. So Indiana can run the football. They will spread it out. Meanwhile, you got Curtis Rourke, who's thrown 27 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. Those numbers are slightly skewed because of the type of competition they played. Now, if Notre Dame can put Indiana in a throwing type position, this bodes well because they are the top 3 passing defense in the country. Now, here's the other thing. Most people don't talk about Notre Dame's ability to heat up the passer. Everybody's talking, they don't get pressure like Ohio State. Well, I beg to differ. The thing is, Notre Dame does not have one guy that sticks out. That's the thing when people look at Notre Dame. They don't look at how this team really doesn't have a bunch of guys. They heat you up. They've got 30 sacks on the season, led by Riley Mills, Howard Cross, who's been in and out of the lineup. He would have more than that if he was not hurt. But then you got Donovan Henish at 3.5. As I said, Boubacar Traore has 3 sacks. And then you look at how Jalen Sneed has come on and really played exceptionally well. But a lot of these offenses have become more and more accustomed to what Notre Dame likes to do. And like I said, you got Junior Tuihalamaka, who has played well, Jason Onye, and of course the ageless wonder, Jack Kaiser. And there's so many guys that are just getting into it. These guys are just really getting into it and really playing exceptionally well. You got so many of these guys that have come along and just played such exceptional football, not to mention that secondary that has they've been such a ball hawkish group, led by, once again, the All-American and former Bednarik Award winner, Xavier Watts. And that's why I say that Travis Hunter is a disgrace to the award. No offense to him. Even Watts had more interceptions than he did. And Watts is a converted wide receiver. Did you hear what I said? Converted wide receiver for all you Hunter lovers. Yeah. So it could have been done here too. Just to let you know. And had that 100-yard pick six and the USC game. Just to let y'all know he's got good hands too. Forced fumble return, recovery. Adon Schuler has 3 interceptions on the year. Leonard Moore, Christian Gray, who had that 99-yard pick six in the USC game. Jordan Clark's got an interception. I mean, the list goes on. The Notre Dame defense has 17 interceptions on the year. So Indiana's really never played a ball-hawking defense until they played Ohio State. And like I said, Ohio State's defense is just like ours in a sense. They get better pressure with traditionally with 4, but they had to go and send the pressure. Al Golden is a guy that doesn't hesitate to heat him up. And I think ultimately that's what's going to cost Indiana. And let's back up a little bit. Everybody made the statement that if Indiana takes care of the ball on special teams, this is a different game. Well, guess what? Notre Dame's blocked 5 kicks and nearly gotten several others. And this game's going to be cold and possibly in the snow. It don't get no better, Hoosier fans. I think when you start overlooking one aspect of the ball that Coach Marcus Freeman has preached since he's been here, and teams overlook it, he makes you pay. This is why Notre Dame is going to be separated from a lot of other teams in this college football playoff. They don't ignore special teams. Now, the only thing I could say is a weakness is their kicking game, meaning field goals. But outside of everything else, from the kick returns to punt returns to punt blocks, they pay attention to detail. And for that matter, I think that they get a block. It sets them up. Notre Dame's going to be able to lean on them eventually later on in this game. I think Notre Dame not only takes the 7 points, but they end up winning big. I think they run the ball. I think Riley Leonard has a big game running the football along with Jeremiah Love and possibly Jadarian Price. And I think our secondary shows the entire country what Al Golden blitz package looks like. Now, moving on to that next game, which would be a game that many in this area would love to have a ticket to. It's going to be the All-State Sugar Bowl, where the Irish would face off against the Georgia Bulldogs. Ain't that right, Brad? Now, there are a lot of people that say Notre Dame can't compete with the teams of the SEC. I beg to differ. We walked into College Station, smacked A&M. You heard me? Smacked them. The Notre Dame Fighting Irish are not afraid of the Southeastern Conference. Now, we played Louisville, beat Louisville, a team that smacked Kentucky. A team that y'all hold in such high regards. And I'm just talking about the SEC fan base. With that being said, looking at this game, everybody talks about how Texas is this and Texas is that. Much like the Irish, the Texas Longhorns only had a handful of games that you can really shake a stick at. But Georgia is probably going to be dealing with Carson Beck not being here. Now, I will say this. At the end of the day, whether Carson Beck plays or whether he doesn't play, the Irish are going to have to stick the run game. Because ultimately, when the Dogs have gotten in trouble, that's what they do. And believe it or not, Georgia's still got a pretty stout offensive line. And they can fool you. And this Etienne kid who transferred out of Florida, this is a guy that has some wheels. But ultimately, he hasn't played a defense where he's going to get smacked by a couple of linebackers. He's played a lot of teams that play these 4-3s, and he's not used to trying to figure out what linebacker is going to come and what safety is going to come. Now, I will say this. This is the kind of physical game that we haven't seen outside of Army and Navy. Now, you can chuckle all you want to. Army and Navy are a physical football team. Maybe not the type of physicality that you think about when you associate it. But this is the team when you wake up the next day, you're sore. You're going to have to get a couple ice packs. But ultimately, Notre Dame is going to run the football, stay patient with it, and pull the same game plan that Georgia Tech used on them. Riley Leonard has a massive game, and ultimately what happens in this one is that I'm basing this game off of Carson Beck not playing. Now, if we get the notion that Carson Beck is going to play, then I'll change the approach here. But right now, we're going with Beck's not playing. They're going to heat up Gunnar Stockton. And yes, I agree. Texas's guys were physical, but they weren't nearly physical enough. And I think ultimately Texas didn't blitz enough, which is a shock. You can hardly say that about a Texas team. They usually bring the heat, but Al Golden's going to heat him up. Al Golden's going to heat Gunnar Stockton up. He's going to have to make some plays. And I don't think he's going to be able to make enough because I think ultimately Georgia's defensive line gets worn down. Because needless to say, when you're out there trying to go up against Notre Dame's guys, what's going to happen is they're going to give you a couple of things, not necessarily to look at, but to think about, especially with Riley Leonard. And ultimately, if they get to a point where they're misdirecting you and they get those pulling guards going, you're going to have problems. Because the biggest issue with Georgia's defense is they go at the first thing they look at. The first thing they see, they jump at it. I think Notre Dame is going to ultimately continue to push down the field. And a lot of people are going to say they're not that physical. Oh, they are. I think ultimately that when you look at this game, you do see that the Dogs do have some physical guys on that defensive line. However, you got to have some speed on that line too. And I ultimately think that the Bulldogs have some very skilled guys on the outside. However, when you get guys that weigh 300 pounds pushing on and leaning on you as well, it's not that easy to deal with. And then with that misdirection and guys like Jeremiah Love that are coming up, they do a great job keeping their linebackers clean. But the question is, can they get penetration? That's the question. And I think Riley Leonard becomes the X factor, especially being that Georgia Tech was able to do what they did with the decent line that they had. And Haynes King being not Riley Leonard. And Georgia Tech not having but one running back, but the Irish have 3 running backs. 2 possible All-Americans. So with that being said, I say Notre Dame is able to pull out at least a 6-point win. Moving on to the next round. Sorry, Brad. I already know the comment's going to blow up when you hear this one. But Notre Dame's perfect scenario, seeing in the next round, would be Penn State. And I know a lot of you are going to say, well, now why not Boise State? They can run Notre Dame has had problems with the run gashing, and you don't want to see SMU because SMU has got a nightmare of a offense. I don't care what anybody says. People can say what they want about SMU. If you ain't watched SMU play, don't comment. But I think Notre Dame would ultimately want Penn State because Drew Aller is not making good decisions. And honestly, watching that Oregon game, I don't even have to say much about this game. Notre Dame can just lean and just be patient and wait on Aller to make a mistake. They can play the same game plan that they played against Ohio State. I'm not sold on Drew Aller. I think that was just a one game, and it's not going to happen again. I think Notre Dame is able to lean on Penn State. Penn State's defense is pretty good, but I think they're going to wear down. Penn State's not a very big defense. They're a physical defense for what they have, but I don't think they're going to be able to withstand the offensive line that Notre Dame has. I think Penn State's going to try to run the crap out of this thing and try to keep the ball as much out of Drew Aller's hand as possible. It doesn't work. He's going to throw the ball into harm's way like he did against Oregon, but the difference is Notre Dame's secondary makes you pay. And I think he does. And I think they do several times. And I think this game could be a walk away in the Orange Bowl. And because this is going to be one of those games that's going to be in Miami. And I ultimately think this is going to be one of those games Riley Leonard can just go off. They've not faced a team like the Irish. They will, if they get this far, they will have faced a team like this within SMU. But I honestly think they will not be able to handle Leonard if this goes this far, or be able to handle Jadarian Price as well as Jeremiah Love. And then for the national championship, what perfect way would it be to send Ryan Day out? And that's another thing. I don't want to see Ryan Day fired. I'm not a fan of him, but that comment he made last year, being PO'd about Nick Luholt saying what he said. Dude, you just won the game with 10 guys on the field. I think this is a game that's pretty even with the exception of one thing. Notre Dame's secondary. Ohio State's secondary, they grab and they hold a lot because they're not very good in coverage. And when you're not very good in coverage, just like the Bulldogs, just saying, when you're not good in coverage, that's what you do. Your last resort is to hold, grab, do whatever it is you can. And that's fine. I mean, a lot of people are going to say, well, look at USC. Well, here's the problem with the USC game. They were throwing back shoulder fades. And that's fine. That by any means necessary. And it ended up costing them 2 pick sixes too. You live by the fade, you die by the fade. You live by the back shoulder, you die by the back shoulder. And they died by it. But I look at this game and I don't really see much that the Irish have to do differently. They've got to make sure that Travion Henderson and company don't get going. And leave this game into Will Howard's hands. Blitz crazy like Al Golden loves to do. I think they do that. And I think they lean on Ohio State's defensive line. And they're able to get it done. Because unlike many years, Ohio State's defensive line is not as great as it's been. You saw that in the Indiana game. They needed to blitz to get to Rourke because they just went down the field and just carved them up. And as I said, I look at this game and I say, I think ultimately this is going to be a game where if Mbuka and company can't get it done, I don't think this is going to be much of a game. I think ultimately Ohio State is going to give them a battle. But I think if they can't run the football, which is probably one of the Achilles heels of the Irish. They don't give up a whole bunch, but there are times when they get drives where they sprinkle out and let some yardage go. We saw that in the USC game. So it could be a game where it's back and forth, but I think ultimately the Irish are able to lean on Ohio State more. I think Ohio State makes mistakes in the secondary, and Riley Leonard is able to take advantage. Throw that fade that he's been working on with Bo Collins and Jaden Grayhouse, as well as Eli Reardon and Mitchell Evans. And I think those are the guys that are the difference because everybody keeps forgetting about those weapons that we have because we don't throw it. And we win our first national championship since 1988. And guess what, Brad? That will only be 37 years. Not 40. It's time. It's time. Let me know what you guys think about Notre Dame's perfect bracket to the national championship. Make sure you comment down in the comments if you don't think that if you think there's another route that Notre Dame can take to the national championship. Please put them down in the comments. And Brad, let me know why you think Notre Dame can't beat Georgia. Also, if you subscribe to the show, please put your name down in the comments. Let me know what you think. Also, go to my Instagram at Mr. CeeLo. Find out all the things that I'm caught up in. Also, go to the Facebook group at Gridiron Gab Triple Option. Also, the Facebook page. Befriend the Facebook page, Gridiron Gab Triple Option, and find out what other cool things you can be a part of. But until the next time, same Gab channel, same Gab platform.